Welcome everyone to the CORFAC deal-making session, which this is a follow-up to our fall virtual conference we had. I'm David Boyd, co-managing principal with Boyd Commercial, CORFAC International in Houston. I'm the chairman of the Transactions and Business Development Committee for 2020. Boyd Commercial has 11 agents, and we specialize in industrial, office, and land brokerage services. We've been involved with CORFAC for over 25 years, and I've been in numerous roles on the executive committee and in communications committee, and I always enjoy working with the fellow CORFAC members. Over the years, we've leveraged CORFAC International to win business, execute multi-market assignments, and learn best practices for you all. And we're grateful for the information and knowledge and expertise that we have within the network. This year's vice chair is Ed Delbacaro, Executive Vice President and San Francisco Bay Area Regional Manager with TRI Commercial, CORFAC International. Ed, will you please share a little bit about your companies and area of expertise?
Yes, thank you, David. So yes, I'm Ed Delbacaro. Been affiliated now with CORFAC 2 years. I am the San Francisco Bay Area player coach manager. In the Bay Area, we have offices in San Francisco, Walnut Creek, Oakland, and newly in San Jose. We also have offices in Sacramento and Roseville. And we also do property management and full service brokerage. And we loved working with CORFAC. In fact, I was just in beautiful John Day City near Bend with our capacity counterpart, and we listed a U.S. forestry building, signed last week. It's going to be $9 million sale.
Cool.
Excellent. Thank you, Ed. The goal of today's session is to discuss emerging trends in commercial real estate and resulting new business opportunities in the market today. We have assembled a panel to discuss case studies of recent CORFAC member-to-member referrals, as well as non-referral transactions that illustrate opportunities that are occurring in today's market. This is meant to be interactive. So today, as we go through each panelist's presentation, we are going to ask that we take questions from the audience. Please use the chat feature to send in your questions as we go, and Ed will help moderate those questions for our panelists. Before we get started, I want to congratulate the member firms that have completed and reported referral transactions so far in 2020. If you did a CORFAC deal and you don't hear your name on this list, please get it reported through our extranet. But I want to congratulate Hinkle Schuler, TRI Commercial, Boyd Commercial, the Clavin Company, Porter Realty Company, Capacity Commercial, King Industrial, L. Mason Capitani, Blue and Obrecht, Donahoe Real Estate, Commercial Properties Inc., Joel and Granat, the Garibaldi Group, and the Andover Company. So far this year, we've had only 17 transactions reported, which is, we were historically underreported. So please talk to your staff and talk to your agents to make sure we're inputting not only CORFAC to CORFAC referrals, but also major transactions that are non-referral business. Last year, and typically we average about 60 to 70 referrals per year. So I know there's more out there. Obviously, transaction volume is also down, but I'm still pleased with what we've got year to date. So I'd like to welcome our presenters today. We have Michael Fuhrman with Berger Commercial in Fort Lauderdale. He's a senior vice president, a JD, a CCIM, and SIOR. We have Howard Greenberg, SIOR, founder and president of Howard Properties in White Plains, New York. Joe Santalaria, first vice president, Bradford Commercial Real Estate, Dallas. Steve Garza, CCIM and SIOR, Managing Principal with Providence Commercial Real Estate, San Antonio. And Brian Mulvaney, CCIM, SIOR, Senior Vice President and Partner, Voight Real Estate Services, San Diego. Thank you all for joining us today. So we were all talking within our transactions committee, and this slide illustrates where we're seeing a lot of movement today in the market. In the last 6 months, there's been a lot of change occurring and expedited trends, but some of the topics we want to touch on today are industrial, logistics, and third-party logistics companies, government leases, adaptive reuse of property, including hotel conversion to residential, retail conversion to industrial, things of that nature, which are starting to occur. There's also a big trend towards cold storage, both for food and obviously now medical distribution. We've got downtown office subleasing. We've got new manufacturing occurring due to onshoring and nearshoring, as well as manufacturing of PPE, high tech and artificial intelligence, blend and extend leasing is going on now in many places. Defensive exercising of lease options, which we haven't really seen in the past, and subleasing for expansion. There are many ways to leverage your CORFAC affiliation, and I encourage everybody to reach out to fellow CORFAC members in other markets and develop your own contacts. But we want to connect members to members for referrals. You can search the transaction database for potential clients and leads. Please report your transactions to CORFAC for network-wide analysis. Share best practices with colleagues. Access the CORFAC app on your phone and your online tools for property listings and more. And please thank CORFAC first when you're doing business outside your own market. Now I'd like to introduce our first panelist. Michael, could you tell us a little bit about your firm and your marketplace?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for having Steve and I on to talk about this transaction. My name is Michael Feuerman. I am a tenant rep broker here in South Florida. I've been doing this about 21 years, about 85% office, 15% industrial and land, and strictly tenant rep. Berger Commercial Realty is a firm that's been in business down here in South Florida since 1998. We have 15 brokers. We list about 6 to 7 million square feet for sale or lease. We manage about 7 to 8 million square feet. And we are heavily involved in brokerage and property management all over South Florida, Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties, which are the Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach metro areas. We also handle receiverships when there's a recession or whenever they're required. We're also now opening up a multifamily division. We're obviously a CORFAC member and happy to be so. I've worked with some CORFAC brokers in different markets. Steve Eichhorn in Ohio. Right now working with Dan Granat, just starting the relationship there in Atlanta. And of course with Steve Garza in San Antonio. And I agree, think CORFAC first. When you go into a market, there's just a good feeling to be with someone who's part of your network. There's a trust that comes with that. And what I'll talk about today is industrial logistics 3PL deal. Steve, you want to introduce yourself and then I'll get back to the deal?
Sure. Can everybody hear me okay? Is my mic on? Okay. Yeah, my name's Steve Garza. I'm the managing principal at Providence Commercial Real Estate in San Antonio, Texas. And we have been a member of CORFAC since 1996. And so while that's certainly is a tribute to our loyalty and our confidence and satisfaction and happiness about being part of CORFAC. It also means we're really old. And so, but happy to be here today. Our firm covers the San Antonio area primarily, but we also just cover Corpus Christi, Laredo, and the Rio Grande Valley, and have done deals in all those markets over the years. I've also actually done a couple of deals out in El Paso, but that's been a while. We don't have an affiliate there, and there is not a whole lot of commercial brokerage expertise in any of those other smaller markets that I mentioned. So we can certainly help and provide services in those areas. We do primarily office, industrial, and commercial land. Some retail shopping center work we do, but not a lot. And do a lot of, and we've done some apartment sales as well. Investment sales we've done across all the product types, shopping center, office, industrial, and apartments.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, so I'll dive right into talking about the transaction if you're good with that.
Please.
Okay, excellent. So I have a client here in South Florida. I've done multiple transactions for them. They're headquartered here. They're a pharmaceutical 3PL, third-party logistics firm. They distribute pharmaceuticals on behalf of their third-party clients. And their clients are global. They distribute all over the US. They have 4 locations here in Florida. They have a location in Houston, Texas, in New Jersey, in Lockbourne, Ohio, and now San Antonio. We're looking in other places as well, specific markets where one of their clients has a need. As with all my clients, I try to be a relentless advocate for them and resource at all times. And so they've come to me and said, we want you to handle our work all over the country, which leads me to be able to reach out to CORFAC offices in different areas. So in July, of this year, they asked me about San Antonio. They had a client who had a requirement. They had several pallets they needed placed and 3PL work done. And my client leases a lot of their locations from 2 particular landlords, Prologis and Exeter Property Group. Everybody knows Prologis, publicly traded industrial REIT. Exeter is a privately held industrial REIT, also very large. I think one of the 3 top industrial properties in the world. And it's been easy to do business with them in other markets because they already know my client. We talk with the principals at Exeter directly, and decisions are made fairly quickly. So they had a requirement for minimum 28 clear ESFR sprinklers. Building had to be climate controlled or such that we could install it. Needed 50 to 100,000 square feet. And I did a search on CoStar. I located several opportunities, including a couple Exeter properties. And in August, reached out to Steve and said, are you available to be our local broker there? And I had not worked with Steve before. We had traded a couple emails on some other possible deals, but he was very receptive, very willing to work together, and very available when the client needed something. He was there. If he couldn't be there, he would cancel whatever he had and make time to be there. So we reviewed the various options. We honed in on the Exeter building because it really met all their needs and the ease of doing business was there. And Steve met the client for a tour. He brought along local resources. Here's the building. So it's 108,800 square feet. We took half, which is 54,400. And Steve was instrumental in helping us choose which half. He met the client on site, toured with them in the morning, and then in the afternoon toured with them and their third-party client to help them look over the building, qualify it, and determine, it was already demised into 2 54,000 square foot bays. Steve brought a contractor and an architect, and the contractor had already done work on the building for a prior tenant, a brewery that was in there, had done some TI work and then bailed. So this guy had a lot of knowledge of the building. and really, talked about the insulation on the walls and the ceiling, was able to help us hone in on, I think it was the north bay that we chose because of that. This was August and September. We worked on a proposal. I would copy Stephen all the emails. I would give him the proposals to look at before I submitted them. He had a lot of value to add to them. He's a very smart, savvy broker with a lot of experience. We signed a lease October 16th. Got it done. It was just under $4 million, long-term lease. And it was great to have somebody local there who's, part of our family, so to speak. We kind of hit the ground running right away with the familiarity and worked together very well. And I really appreciate Steve's being there for the client in the same manner that I would. And the client took possession, and Steve sent the fee invoice to the landlord. And we're all set here. It was a great experience. It was very smooth. And I appreciate being part of CORFAC, and it's easy to do market-to-market referrals and deals like this.
Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
Steve, do you have anything to add on your experience?
Just a couple of things. Yeah, Mike had really good control of the client, which was very, very helpful. And we bringing the local contractor, a general contractor, is very fortuitous that it's a contractor that I plugged into a couple of other deals recently. And when I called him up and asked him to join me on the tour, he already knew the building very well because he had done some finish out for the a prior tenant that, as Mike said, ended up bailing on the deal. And so that was a real advantage, and it was a real plus. He really knew the building very, very well. And it really made us look good, I think, to the client to have him on board. And we actually struggled a bit because the client didn't want us to bring any other professionals along. He just wanted me there along with him and his client. But we kind of pushed that it would be important. And then when we told him that the GC that we knew and familiar with had this familiarity with the building, it really turned out to be a real plus for the deal. And again, it made us look really good. So overall, it was a very, very smooth transaction and a great example of CORFAC to CORFAC. I did and always will, and we always have been very, very conscious and sensitive to prioritizing CORFAC work, as opposed to, or as we mix it in with the other work that we're doing at any given time. So.
Thank you, Steve. One thing I want to mention or note, the name of the client is confidential due to with third-party logistics companies. They're contract-based and extremely competitive. This is a national tenant that Michael has opportunities to work with across the country. So I want to congratulate you, Michael, for the referral and control of that client, and it's a great opportunity within the network. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael. This is Ed. So there were a couple chat questions. So the first question is two-part. How did you initially gain control or meet this tenant? And then, as important, how did you take over and make this a national account, multi-city versus just local?
Yep. So, it's funny. This client, before I joined Berger, I worked for a couple of years at Cushman & Wakefield. And I was not able to expand the relationship nationally there. When they went to Houston, we brought in a Cushman broker, and not a knock on Cushman, but my client didn't have a confidence level. And I didn't get that deal. And I was very unhappy about it. I find that being in CORFAC, it's easier to do market-to-market deals than it was at Cushman, and not just with this client. So in any case, how did I meet this client? So I'm fairly active in our local Jewish Federation chapter, as he is as well. And we have a friend in common, social friend, one of my neighbors who kept telling me, you got to meet him, you got to meet him. And I did meet him several times. He knew what I did. He had a broker at NAI. And he came to me at one of the Federation meetings and said, I need 30,000 square feet right away. And my broker's not finding it. Do you have any ideas? So, you know, I'm a lawyer as well as being a broker. I'm still licensed. I always tell my clients to get a lawyer to review their leases. But in this case, I showed them a building, and within literally 7 days, I had the lease, the LOI negotiated, and I negotiated the whole lease for him and had him in possession within a week. And after that, he kept giving me more opportunities. And his other broker lamented the fact that I was in there, but he lost the client. And I just, as I said before, I'm relentless for my clients. You know, I work very hard for them. And try to
Keyword is
make-
relentless.
Yeah, you have to be. And I, you know, do whatever they need. And I eventually ended up doing another transaction from here, followed by 2 more. And then we started talking about other states, and just kind of looked over the shoulder of another broker in another state, corrected his mistakes, and eventually he gave me a shot out of state. We did a deal in Lockbourne, Ohio. And now he said to me while we were talking about San Antonio, I want you to handle all of my work nationally. I just earned it, just the hard way.
Relentless. I like that, Mike. Relentless. That's the word for the day. Relentless.
Yeah.
Okay, let's thank you very much, Mike and Steve. Howard, you're up.
Thank you. My name is Howard Greenberg. I've been my firm, Howard Properties LTD, is located in Westchester County, New York, just north of Manhattan. I am a one-man shop and been a member of CORFAC since 1999. I'm 98% tenant rep, primarily office, do a little bit of flex, a little bit of industrial. So a couple of things. The particular client, this high-tech manufacturing client, I met because I've been writing a number of market articles for the local business journal, which I've been doing for years and years. And while I get a lot of kudos and people say, gee, you're a real expert and everything, I couldn't really point to a particular piece of business that I had gotten from all of these hours of work. Well, sure enough, in 2017, the article was published, and I get an email from this client who turned into this client that now I read your market article. Now I understand why I have not been able to find a building in 2 years. Would you please give me a call? And I did, and I went down and I met with him and I met with his brother, and took a little bit of time, but I got an exclusive representation agreement, even though he had been working with another broker who had not fulfilled his requirement. And we went off to find a building. And unfortunately, the client was in a small, difficult to operate in building, but he was in literally the middle of a small town, walk to the train, walk to nice restaurants, nice neighborhood, you know, really special permit kind of use. And he wanted to buy a building in a similar neighborhood that was a better industrial building. And I knew from the beginning this wasn't going to happen, but I listened to the client and so on. And we saw a bunch of buildings and they were never right. So I said, do me a favor. I want to go show you something for lease, even though I know that's not your desire, but it's the perfect product for you. And I took him to a flex building that was owned by one of the larger landlords in Westchester. And long story short, we made a 10-year deal for 14,000 square feet. They primarily work with big food and big pharma. They create machinery that tests the integrity of packaging as far as degrading, as far as oxygen penetration, moisture penetration, things like that. So, you know, his clients have remained solid through the pandemic. If anything, his business is doing well. And long story short, he needs more manufacturing space on that lower level that he's in. And in order to do that, he had to push upstairs to get some additional space. Make a long story short, we looked at kind of building a unit from scratch, and it got very expensive. And then I said, I was playing golf with him one day, and I said, gee, you know, there's an existing unit of office space up there. We never looked at it. Let's go look at it. And sure enough, we walked into the unit and it was 95% right for him. He had to take down a couple of walls and landlord had to do some paint and carpet, but that was it. And the long story short was he took that unit and took another 6,000 feet or so. So basically, we're going to double the size of his space. And as part of it, we're going to wrap around with about a two-year, 4-month extension of the existing 14,000 feet. So he's going to be 28,000 feet for 10 years. And, you know, it's a great client and so on. But, and look, one thing before we get to my next one, you've really got to stay in touch with your clients these days. You really got to ask them what's going on. People don't know what to do today. And I certainly don't claim to know what to do, but I listen to and I read a lot of the articles and podcasts and you name it. And at least I understand a lot of the scenarios that are out there, a lot of the questions that clients want to ask. And it really helps just to give them an idea of what I'm hearing in the trades and in the world out there. There are stable businesses like this one that will make decisions. There's no question about it. Do your customers want or need a blend and extend? I've got law firm clients that say, hey, we're going to come through this fine, but we really need to get our occupancy costs down in 2021 when, you know, we're not going to be using our office in the full capacity. So we got to do that. And I've got 2 large deals in the 50,000 foot range where I've got an opportunity to do a blend and extend with this client, again, because they need some short-term relief. Deals are dearer today for brokers, and they are dearer today for landlords. And the higher quality client you have, the better off you are, A, because they're going to make decisions, they have the ability to transact, and B, because these are deals that landlords really want to stretch to make. And in this marketplace, obviously any tenant is going out there, their expectations are probably below market expectations, but you know, landlords will stretch for clients of good quality and good financials. Christy, can we switch to the next slide? Thank you. I think I said I was 98% tenant rep. This is my 2% landlord rep. It's a 148,000 foot building in downtown Yonkers, New York, which is right on the Hudson River. Very good public transportation, both local and on the Metro North train line from New York City. I represent the landlord who bought the building maybe 2-3 years ago. One of the reasons they bought it was there was a large number of government and not-for-profit tenants in there, which in their words are sticky. And I concur with that estimation. So long story short, as part of my representation, we are relocating the Social Security Administration from the 10th floor down to the 5th. Needed a whole large build out, frankly, and this building, the front facade that you see, has great views of the Hudson River. So the higher the floors, the better the views. So we're going to get back a high floor and give up a lower floor. And we're currently working with 45,000 feet in 2 other tenancies, both Westchester County agencies, who again do want to build there, do want to be in that building. There's a lot of not-for-profit agencies, and let's call it synergies between the traffic in the building. To the chat question that just came up, the Social Security lease does not have a cancellation clause. It's got what they call firm term, and then it's got an automatic right to renew for a couple of years after the firm term. The county leases have kind of been all over the place. You know, all of the municipalities and counties and states are hurting financially. So they've kind of been all over the place, but we think we've got a term set with no cancellation. They wanted cancellations. We pushed back very hard and figured out a way to do it without cancellation.
Could you share that, Howard?
Yeah.
They wanted cancellations and you figured out how to do it without cancellations?
Yeah. It wasn't easy, but they wanted to go according to appropriations. I mean, literally
Annual funding.
Cancellation probability from day one, which is certainly not a financeable lease. So we were able to get to a term there are two layers in the county. One, you have to go to the Board of Legislators for, and one, you just have to go to what's called the Board of Acquisitions and Contracts, which is much smaller and less involved. And we were able to shoehorn it into the requirements for the lesser group, the Board of Contracts. So
Good.
not done yet, but that's the direction that we're heading in. So right there, that's 57,000 feet of this building that we hope to get locked up very shortly for, good term. Do I have another minute, Dave?
You have 45 seconds.
All right. One thing I want to make a big pitch for, and I'm happy to revisit this if anybody wants to call me or talk to me about it, is get exclusive representation agreements from your clients. You get control. You become an insider. You're not a guy looking to make a commission. You're a trusted advisor. You have a relationship. Every discussion becomes we, where you are aligned with the client as opposed to the client, and then you're on the outside waiting while they're making their decisions. I just think it's critical. It's been a great boon to my career, and I think it will be yours as well.
Very, very good point. Well said, Howard. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I do have one question, quick question, maybe Howard can answer. Howard, I'm intrigued because I do the same thing that you do. I do a lot of written and Zoom speeches and or written publications. Whether it's tied to a direct deal, why don't you comment on 10 seconds? You create a brand, people recognize you, and then you make yourself an expert by reading. So
yeah, and I can even point to two other fee-based assignments that I got. One was somebody who was buying a building and they wanted me to do a report on how I thought that building was going to fare in the marketplace. And another fee-based assignment is somebody that's doing a refi, coincidentally, of the same building. And post-COVID or during COVID, they want me to give my opinion on the market and how the building will fare going forward. So
very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Howard. Brian, will you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Voight and your transaction?
Absolutely. My name's Brian Mulvaney. I'm with Voight Real Estate Services, CORFAC International. I do have my own group, as you can see in the background, which is kind of a playoff on CORFAC. I mean, we're an independent firm. We're one of the larger, I think, CORFAC members, but we all co-op. So I'm only as good as my partner in my next city. And I've done transactions all over the country. This particular deal was in Virginia that I'm going to talk about. But, being a CCIM and an SIOR, I rely heavily on my affiliations, being that we're always competing with the JLLs, CBs, Cushmans of the world. And I think we've got a better platform because you're not stuck with somebody they give you to. And so it's not a pitch for CORFAC, as just as much as it's been enjoyable. I've been with the firm 21 years. We've got offices in San Diego and Carlsbad, so that can't handle San Diego County. We've got an office in Los Angeles, one in the Inland Empire, and then we've got Irvine and Anaheim. So we cover Southern California pretty well, but it's the Mulvaney Commercial Alliance or CORFAC International that helps us cover the world. And that's my statement for today is, really asking where else can we help you? And so this assignment, we had worked with the company in Poway, a local market. We actually did a storage deal for them. So this was found through a listing that we had. We had some sublease space a couple of years back, and it was the service, the concept of what do we do? We're people that are of service to others. And charity is also important in our practice, doing things for other people that are not business related. So we interviewed, and one of our pitches, one of our slides in our package after we did the short-term 12,000 foot dead storage deal was where else are you doing business? Can we help you out anywhere else? So we initially started looking for them to expand in San Diego and buy a building. Pricing on buildings has gotten up to about $200 a foot now. So back in that time, it was industrial building at $150 a foot. It's a little pricier than the one they bought in Virginia. They decided, look, we're going to look at a distribution center. So we actually looked at Tennessee, everything going all the way back. We looked at Indiana, Tennessee. Then they decided, look, we did a logistics study, decided, really East Coast, we want to utilize East Coast ports. So we looked at Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia. realizing, looking at drive times to their customers. A lot of their customers are GSA, institutional. They do stuff for Staples, and believe it or not, but they're a service provider of mounting devices for monitors. I don't know how many people are working with dual monitors, even triple these days, but it's pretty common. And so they have all sorts, whether it's home TVs, for your walls, they have mounting products. And they said, look, we started looking at rates, and they made the decision, we're not going to expand in San Diego. It's too expensive here. We're set. We're going to do East Coast. So Mounted is a family-owned business, and we started looking back east. I used a few of our different associations through SIOR. Didn't exercise people too much until we got the logistics part figured out. I just don't like to do that. You know, I don't like to have people. So we're pulling surveys, narrowing down the field. We had a deal almost ready to sign, probably the least expensive price-wise. You know, in a $4 market, we did a $3. You know, we're at monthly here in California, by the way. You're annual everywhere else. So we had a $4 a year market, $4.15 market. We had a $3.25 deal, not the best building, but we were always looking for something for them to buy as well, which is in the background. And then Dick Porter put a project out, and we jumped on it quickly. It was in Prince George County, so it was a little bit further away from the ports than we had initially anticipated. But that, you know, if you're loading a container and grabbing a container to take it an extra, 70 miles isn't a big deal, or it's about 60 miles from the port actually. So we found a facility, shortening up the story a little bit, and then we went and started doing some due diligence. One thing that was interesting about this facility, if you want to go to the next slide, is it was expandable. So I want to talk a little bit about the deal and the nuances. And there, a lot of seasoned brokers here, but for anybody that's newer in the industry, it was a little more complex than buying that building that you're seeing there at 50,000 feet. So you can see the trucks parked in the driveway. Well, they had been cited for the business park violations for those trucks, and that had actually was on title. And but the site was expandable. The loading situation wasn't the best in the world. It was underparked, and the sprinkler system, believe it or not, was substandard, so that the existing tenant, which was a moving company, couldn't stack over 12 feet. So we had some inherent, flaws in the building. Nice site, and then if you can see the, additional land there, that's a retention basin for the neighborhood. So in order to expand the building, we had to make sure that that could be done with environmental regulations. We call them CEQA. Can we expand the building? That was important to the client. So what we did is we did some due diligence, got contractors involved, had it in escrow, found a really good engineer that had originally worked on this project and the whole business park in general. Dick Porter was so spot on. I mean, anytime we needed anything, he had an answer and a solution, including the, Hollingsworth, who are the developers of this project, good landlord and owner, even though it was owned by the moving company. So we looked at the building and said, look, we're going to expand the loading. It had 3 dock positions and a grade level ramp. So we took, you can see all the trucks there. We actually expanded it. We're going to expand it to 8 loading positions. So while it started as a $2.3 million deal, they're going to probably put substantial funds into it, but it made sense. And then we have the ability to expand it, which they're not going to do right away. So they'll grow their operations back east. If there's a need, they can add an additional 50,000 feet. We have a place to relocate that retention basin, got costs for doing all of that. But also on the first phase, we went and, okay, we're going to do the fire sprinklers, put a fire pump room in there, convert it to ESFR, which allows any use now. So that's being done now. Plans were just finished. We're submitting to the county. We've already got our site plan approved. We're going to slightly expand that loading, parking court in the back upper right corner of the site. And then we're going to add parking along the front of the building, as you can see right off the storefront or the front of the building. We're going to take that a little further to the east, which would be towards the bottom of that left corner of the building. So what it does is it allows them to hire up to about 50 to 80 people to work this facility. install state-of-the-art racking, upgrade the sprinkler system, and take it to an 8 dock loading position, which inherently will increase the value of the building. So it wasn't your simplest transaction. And the thing that got us is that one word in a zoning code. It was kind of interesting, quick note. So the SBA, literally, we had to go to the head attorney for the SBA, which happened to be in California, because of a word that had the word that they had the ownership of the business park, had absolute right to approve any use. Now it's it's an industrial zone. The use was approved, but they picked up on one word in a title report that actually slowed us up for 6 weeks to get over the hump to be able to get the loan financed and closed. So the buyer actually closed with additional cash, a conventional loan, and we'll be bringing an SBA loan in, which usually takes 45 to 60 days to fund the second trust deed on that loan. So the bank was creative, the lender, we used B of A, and we did a workaround that allowed us to still qualify for the SBA 504 financing, finance a lot of the equipment and things they're going to put into the building. And Dick was very patient. Last part of the deal is that it was supposed to close in July, and then ended up closing in the end of September, which they frustrated the seller. We kept releasing additional money. And then we finally got it over the close. But if it weren't for Dick and the relationship that I'd met him, one of the CORFAC conferences back, when we could go meet each other in person, he was really invaluable in keeping the client cool and keeping everybody's heads cool in the transaction. So that's kind of the deal in a nutshell. It was, $50 a foot, $53 a foot. And we did look at incentives. So that was a good question there and for Michael, but it also was important. So we did look at incentives in every market, and Prince George County was really motivated. So there were some incentives to their business, hiring the employees. And they also have, it was believe it or not, the freight fees coming out of the East Coast ports are much more effective than trying to bring stuff in through Long Beach or LA ports, or even, we looked at all the ports. So we looked at ports, logistics, and also incentives. And Virginia actually did pretty well. In fact, to the point where the governor did an announcement on the deal and circulated it around, which I have not had in any of my other transactions. I think the only Nashville and Tennessee is another market where they're really proactive in the government. You would have somebody comment or come up with a question.
Thank you, Brian.
And we did use a matrix for doing the various states. So we rated the different markets. So we did a market, then narrowed down the markets, and then went in through buildings. But when you look at availability, it was really difficult. There's a number of buildings they could have leased, and they could have paid, $415 and some of them are actually getting up to $475, $5 a foot for the newer product. But finding something for sale was very rare. So we found kind of the diamond in the rough, or the rough in the needle in the haystack, and we're able to put that together. So Delaware we looked at as well. Weren't a lot of facilities there, but Delaware was a very tax state that had some good incentives, and is obviously, I have a lot of places. It's a good place to be a corporation, but Virginia had everything they need, and frankly, it came down to a building they could buy that lowered their occupancy cost to probably 50 to 75 cents lower to own, even after all their improvements, than it would be to go out and lease a building. And hopefully they'll get a little appreciation in the real estate, which they've done quite well with here in their property that they bought here in San Diego.
Thank you, Brian. That sounds like an incredibly complex transaction, looking across the entire East Coast and evaluating those markets. And then add the fact that you're buying a building and upgrading it to a modernization standard today to be more functional. So I know it took a long time to get done, but it might not have gotten done without Bob Porter's help with all of the engineering and permitting. And I think with that hard work and relentless effort, you all probably created a lot of value for that client in that real estate going forward. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, last note is that we still are involved. I think a good broker, a lot of brokers disappear, and another way to keep continued business, so you're that go-to person. They'll ask us questions about other things, and I'll make the point, I don't care if you want to buy a house, I'll find the person that can help you move people into town, and use your connections, because your connections and your network is your most important lifeblood. And we're reviewing plans right now. He's sending me the plans yesterday. I got to let him comment to him. I'll call him today because it's probably been 3 weeks. And I know we'll be able to do their next deal. And the last statement is my junior partner and I worked on this together. But I think he kind of saw the value of senior junior, because there's things that happen that he's never dealt with before. Even to the point of looking at those trees in the background. Well, that's a floodplain. And, has the building ever flooded on a high tide and a big rain? So, the bay, really reaches all the way back up into this area, and it can block up the water flow. But, we solved all those and got it done. And that's all on that, unless anybody has any other questions.
Thank you, Brian. Hey, Joe, you're up next.
Cool.
You want to talk to us a little bit about Bradford and what's going on in the Dallas market?
Absolutely. I work for Bradford Commercial Real Estate Services in Dallas. I focus in industrial tenant rep. We tend to chop up our submarkets like many others do, where I, with my senior partner, Brock Wilson, we work the DFW airport market, or that's really where we mine for contacts, lease end dates, et cetera. The COVID has been more of a trampoline than a wall for us. We're seeing industrial space really getting eaten up, and really e-commerce is driving that, or logistical firms. Before the recession, or call it up to 2019, product below maybe 50 to 60,000 square feet was really scarce, and the demand was not being met by the development, and the rates are just continually marching higher. There have been some new developments, but the rates we're seeing in those are double of what they were in 2014 and 2015 due to land costs going up. So we're having a lot of tenants, and I'll get to this in the case study, but a lot of tenants that are moving from DFW airport to the submarkets that are south and east of that, to save on rent, because it's a scale between gas costs and real estate costs, and that's starting to tip. One option that we've been doing a lot, or I've had some success with, and some tenants in progress, is subleasing. Usually, or what I've seen the last, I started in 08, but what I've seen the last cycle is usually subleasing is an inferior option, where the tenant has to pay, maybe 25 to 50% of the lease costs to get out of it. But what we're seeing now is, assuming the lease is favorable to the tenant, you can almost even make a profit on that, or cover your brokerage fees, or make 100 or 90% of what your lease costs are. So it's becoming a more attractive option, and tenants are subleasing out their current location and growing into a larger footprint to find more viable options that are better lease rates, since the market has really shifted to favor tenants in 80 to 200, because that's where all the vacancy is. So if you can reach a little bit, you can get a lot more incentives, either with rent abatement, on your first year, free rent, lower lease terms, et cetera. I think I'm good with that slide, David. I can probably go on to my case studies. There we go. Both case studies are they were pretty straightforward industrial transactions, as many of the brokers who are industrial on here will see. One was a tenant who was in the Valwood market, its customer base. DFW Airport, as I alluded to in the former slide, is one of the highest rent districts, or the highest rent for a district industrial in the market. Usually you see rents tick up 20 to 30%. And that's where it becomes difficult, because you have clients that just can't always afford to pay that, but they have to, due to their client pool. So for the first tenant, which was a freight company out of Chicago, They were in a sublease, which was fortunately they had a month-to-month option, more time. As we started the transaction in 2019, we put it to bed for a little bit until about second quarter of 2020, and they were really ready to go. And what was important in making this deal was more so just knowing the vacancies in your submarket and being able to jump on them, not waiting to get a client and then running a CoStar search, using that information to make the deal and showing your client that you're an expert, because there were 2 or 3 clients fighting for the space. And because I knew of it beforehand, I knew we had to go tour immediately and to get in front of line and be able to win the space. It was a little bit higher than what the tenant wanted to pay, but we were able to get them an extra month free and kind of whittle a little bit off the security deposit. And this helped the client, I guess, justify growing into the space. It wasn't a very large transaction. It was 20,000 square feet, but we see rates for $10, $11 gross in this submarket, which are much higher than average in many of the markets of either in DFW or submarkets, DFW or markets across the nation. The other case study was a deal out of Austin for our former CORFAC partner down there, Russ Todd. This was more so the opposite, because the client was, they needed a lot of doors. Some of the other client, sorry about that. There we go. They needed a lot of doors similar to the other clients, but it was just the options available with a lot of doors was newer product. And again, touching on the rates, they were double of what they really could afford. So we had to go to the submarket south and find a asset that had some trailer parking on the side and plenty of doors to fit their need. I believe on a monthly rate, we were about 1,000 or 2,000 above their budget, but just with the lack of supply, they decided to bite on it because this new client was driving so much demand. So it's just, again, it's just really, these 2 deals are really, the important factor on them was just knowing your product before winning the business, so you can really be an expert and get your client in front of line when product becomes a scarcity. And I think I've covered most of the stuff there.
Joe, I sent you a
both. Yes, I see that. Both are 3PL. Yes. One was more of a crating packaging where it's a lot of in and out, and the other needed more of a cross dock situation where it receiving was on one side and I guess shipping was on the other side. So very similar. Very the airport was very important on their decision, where that's where they get a lot of their product. So yes, both were 3PL.
And then my last question, whether there's specific kind of tenants you deliberately look for to get tenant rep for industrial warehouse?
Yeah, I mean, again, with being in the DFW airport market and being in the market east, it's just the tenant base is so heavy logistics. I've just kind of pivoted and try to brand myself as a logistics broker. So when I email and drip on clients or prospects, I usually pull an article from trade magazines that are logistics, and that's so I would say I definitely target that, just because that's just the main type of client I usually run into. They're high and very narrow buildings, 120 feet deep rather than 240 or 300, just because.
Very good.
Christy, can we go to the full video view? Thank you. Thank you, Joe. I'd like to open it up to everybody in the audience. Please send us your questions or comments or additional commentary through the chat. And really, if you want to unmute yourself and make a point, we'd be happy to hear that as well. Ed, you raised your hand?
Yes, I'm under behavior modifications, so I got to raise my hand.
I see you.
So for the panelists, whoever wants to speak, I do multi-site deals. You all do multi-city deals. What interview questions do you ask brokers to qualify them, whether they're CORFAC or not, to I'm calling a different state, different city outside of my region. What questions do you typically ask to see if they're qualified? Michael?
Sure, I'd be happy to weigh in on that. If there's no CORFAC office, I go to another network, SIOR. I'll start with, I'll also look at CCIM. Being independent firms, we're a group of independent firms. I tried not to work with someone who may turn around and compete with me for this client.
How do you find that out?
Well, I'm not going to contact a Colliers or a JLL.
Okay.
It's not, if it's another firm, I look to see what network they're in, and I'll ask them, do you have offices elsewhere? But one of the important things, of course, is, how long have they been in the business? Are they experienced in the particular product type and client type that I'm bringing to the table, whether it's a law firm or, I have an auto dealership client that's looking for sites in Atlanta, and I contacted Dan Granat, and he said, yeah, he's got experience with that, and he knew right away a lot of the ins and outs of that industry and the property. So that becomes important. Ed had mentioned something before, the word relentless, and I know there's some Gen Xers on the call, or new gens. I'm Gen X. New gens, right?
Millennial.
When we say relentless, we don't mean relentless in your prospecting for a particular client. I don't mean call them every minute of every day and stay on them. I mean, that there is a prospecting art, and we just read a book by Jeb Blount, which was terrific, Fanatical Prospecting. But when we say relentless, once you get a client, be a relentless advocate and fiduciary for them, and bend over backwards for them, do everything they need. As Brian mentioned, I think it was Brian, once you get the commission, don't disappear. Be there to do whatever they need, whether you're getting additional payment or not. They will always come back to you. But anyway, that's how I qualify people in other markets. I just check to make sure they're qualified in what we're trying to do.
Ed,
Thank you, Michael.
Ed, this is Howard. I think also that if I've got a client with a particular, I don't know, call it a sweet spot or a personality or a product type that they like, or where they want to be or something, I really try to quiz that broker in the other market about how well they know that type of product or how well they deal with this type of client. Try and drill down a little bit into the personal aspects of it, because part of my job as the outbound broker, if you will, is really knowing my client very, very well, knowing what they respond to, knowing what they're looking for. And I got to make sure that the guy on the local market end understands what I'm communicating with him. Otherwise, we're not going to work well as a team.
I'd like to throw out a quick comment. So there's something I've been employing more recently, and I'm a high energy person, and I, had some hyperactivity ADD issues when I was younger, but, always having it in control. But to be more interested in them and their business instead of trying to be interesting, and listen, and then make your statement. So maybe that comes with maturity, and thank God for martial arts and things like that settled me down. But I think it's the concept of really wanting to know about this person. How did they start the company? How did they get where they are? What's their plans? What's their dreams? What keeps them up at night? Just those things we've dealt with and learned in the different books, and that Jeff Blount, the book you just mentioned, great author. And it's those little inside things that differentiate you. And then I had a requirement the other day, and actually somebody in the office needed some help. So I looked through SIORs, but I tried to find CORFAC affiliates first, because I believe the same thing on the other point. If you go to a Cushman and Wakefield or some of the bigger firms, even during that deal we just did, we had the Colliers guys try to poach our client. But, the guy sent the email. He was looking around and he clicked on something, and next thing you know, Collier's guy, good broker, SIOR, and he was, I probably would have used him in that particular market because there wasn't a CORFAC. But it was just interesting that the client allegiance, nothing happened. It's like, hey, can you check this out? And we did. But I think some good points were just made.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's to my point. if you have an exclusive rep agreement, right in my agreement, it says that the tenant or buyer will refer any inquiry they get from a landlord, to another broker, whatever, to me. And that's part of my thing. And I frequently get emails from my clients say, hey, this broker contacted me, that broker contacted me. And, if they have something that's of interest that they handle exclusively, fine. If not, if they're just prospecting and there's no response.
Good. So we're running up against the end of our session. It's just about 12 o'clock right now. I want to thank all of our panelists for joining today and sharing about your transactions and your experience in the market right now. We're going to leave it open for another 5 or 10 minutes for dialogue, but I just wanted to wrap up first for those of you that need to jump off the call. I want to thank everybody that attended. We had, I believe, over 60 people today, which is fantastic. We've got some upcoming programs that I want to let you know about. We have a next generation Zoom session. The topic is setting achievable goals for 2021. And that's going to be on Wednesday, November 18th at 11 a.m. Central. Additionally, we have a repeat of our CORFAC investment sales call on Tuesday, December 8th at 11 a.m. And that's been a very successful session, basically a sharing of haves and wants for investment properties on a national basis, which I think evermore today, the investment is certainly a national market. But thanks everybody for attending. We'll hold it open for a few more minutes if there's any additional questions. Ed, do you have any questions coming in?
Let me check.
Or jokes?
Well, a comment I would like to make to everybody, because I'm about to go into an office division meeting with my brokers, is people have cabin fever, get disillusioned with national politics. And my immediate retort is, get over it. We broker change. So no matter who won, there's going to be certain silver streaks of economic activity. So I mentioned before, General Motors has hired 3,000 new engineers to anticipate that they have to do more electric cars because of climate change rules. I can go down the list. So maybe people in general on the panel could make comments. If we're brokering change, how do we find those silver streaks, and what are those silver streaks? So for instance, the vaccine is going to need 70 degree below, so they need 10,000 foot cold storage. Are there industrial markets where they're doing cold storage for the vaccine? How do you make money despite COVID? Any comments from the panelists?
Well, so that's interesting. Who made the comment? Was it Brian who said that he sends, no, it was Joe who said that he sends relevant articles to clients he's prospecting with. Sarah D'Amico, who's on the call, is on my team. She found an excellent article yesterday about the cold storage chain and how they're going to need to store vaccines, and that it's going to be very specialized, much higher level cold storage, I think 80 degrees below Celsius. And I sent it on to my client who's in the pharma 3PL business. And he replied immediately and said, thanks for sending. I saw this. I'm already talking with someone in China about equipment for this. So opens up a dialogue. If you see opportunities and you see things that are relevant to your clients, like you said, that's a change, that's something new, some new opportunity, send it to them. At least open up the discussion. And
Sure.
You might be sending them something they don't know. You might be sending something they know or something that's not relevant, but at least they know you're thinking of them.
Right.
There's been a few questions and comments relative to the individual deals you discuss and your methods. I encourage each of the participants to reach out individually to the panelists by email or phone call to discuss your questions and comments so that everybody can collaborate on these ideas.
Hey, David, this is Scott. I got a comment kind of on what Ed was talking about, change. I think there's a lot of uncertainty with the new administration coming in and potential tax laws changing. And we've got a couple of investment groups that are looking at deals, and there's some attraction for sellers right now that if you could close in 2020 versus 2021, we were on a call this morning, and it's likely we're going to get a deal probably about a 10 to 15% discount off of what we thought was their low number because of the uncertainty of the tax laws potentially changing next year. Now, is that going to happen? Who knows? But they have in the past done retroactive. So even if they pass a new tax law, it could be retroactive to January 1st. So I would just say use that to your advantage. If you've got some strong investors that can close quick, all cash, there may be some opportunities.
Thank you.
Could I just say that in the future, when Jonathan sends out an email asking people if you want to participate in a panel, that Jennifer and Christy, Jonathan made this really easy. Sent an outline of the deal. They put together the materials, and thank you so much for doing that. So if anybody out there thinks this is a lot of work, they make it easy for you. And I love hearing from other members, learning about what you do. So I'd encourage you to participate.
Great panel.
Thanks, everybody, for joining. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Jonathan, Christy.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Ed.
Or as we say in San Diego, hang loose.
Mahalo.
Shaka.
Thanks, guys.